Discover the untold story of college hookup culture with American Hookup by Lisa Wade. This insightful and engaging audiobook explores the complexities of modern relationships on campus.
Of all of the parts of the female body, though, the one that men who like women seem keenest to access is the vagina. It is the veritable holy grail of heterosexual male sexuality. It's all the way. In the 1600s they called it the chapel of ease. In the 1700s it was love's altar and the shrine of Venus. In the 1800s they described it as a carnal mantrap, and not in a bad way. 100 years later it was a knick-knack and a ring-dang-doo. Today it's home base, happy valley, and the promised land. And we've been calling it a honeypot for nearly 500 years. Men, at least men who are attracted to women, put extraordinary amounts of effort into getting into the vagina. Men's desire for the vagina is half of why we exist as a species. And, in real life, there are lots of men who love cunnilingus. This is something that my female students, and the ones at Stanford and Indiana, are wrong about. In fact, according to the National Health and Social Life Survey, one of the largest, most comprehensive, and well-designed studies of American sexuality ever completed, men like performing cunnilingus even more than women like receiving it. So, what is this cultural disgust at women's bodies really about? It's quite obviously not about whether cunnilingus is gross. It's certainly not any grosser than fellatio. I can still recall the moment that a male friend of mine first encountered the idea of receiving such a genital kiss. We were first-year college students, he from a very conservative Mormon background, and his immediate reaction was disgust. "But you pee through that thing," he said incredulously. It's true. Men pee through that thing. And there are other reasons why. Someone might find fellatio unappetizing, the smell of a man's genitals after being confined in a pair of pants all day, the difficulty of getting a penis in one's mouth, pubic hairs caught in teeth, the effort to create suction that strains the muscles underneath the jaw, difficulty catching one's breath, and the taste of pre-cum and semen. In fact, when Jess Butler asked female students at the University of Southern California whether they liked fellatio, none of the more than 24 she talked to claimed to enjoy it. As one said, "I'd rather not have to do it ever again in my life. But I feel like I have to." "It's gross," said another. "Nobody likes it," insisted a third in response. A person can truly and emphatically enjoy giving a blow job, but one has to be in the right frame of mind. Ditto for cunnilingus. Yet, while the potential downsides of cunnilingus are front and center in the minds of heterosexual students of both sexes, the similar downsides of fellatio are almost never discussed and are generally considered irrelevant. No one, a student observed, ever talks about what a penis is supposed to smell like or what cum is supposed to taste like. Noting that scented tampons and feminine sprays line the aisles of drugstores, one pointed out, rightly, guys don't have to make sure their junk smells like jasmine. The potentially unpleasant things about fellatio are never used to suggest that women would be justified in refusing to do it. And men never seem to mention the possibility that fellatio might be gross as a reason to fear blowjobs. If it was just about being gross, our attitudes toward cunnilingus and fellatio would still be symmetrical. They're not. So, the idea that vaginas are gross is not really about women's bodies at all. It's about what we do with their bodies. That is, do we use them for getting men off or getting women off? For his orgasm or for hers? Heterosexual students seem to take to the former just fine, but the latter, the privileging of female Pleasure through cunnilingus makes them uncomfortable. That's why. They laugh. They're nervous. Men have more orgasms than women in hookup culture, then, because the culture doesn't promote reciprocity. It's specifically designed for men's orgasm. Female orgasm is acceptable, even ideal, but it's not what it's about. A bisexual man I spoke to at a campus visit put this in stark perspective, observing sheepishly that he prioritized his partner's orgasm when he hooked up with men and his own when he hooked up with women. A guy at Stanford put it equally plainly: I don't think any hookup is based on mutual orgasm, it's really just based on an orgasm for me. This will not be a surprise to college women anywhere. Hookup culture really means 3 years of bad sex, concluded a student at Duke who'd had just about enough. He didn't even care, said a woman at Brown about her most recent hookup. I don't think he tried at all. I think very few guys really care, a student enrolled at the University of Southern California reported. Women are literally just there to let the guy get off. My female students sang the same tune. They talked about desire, but it was rare for them to mention orgasm, or even physical pleasure more generally, as an outcome of hooking up. They often echoed Celeste when she complained about being a masturbation toy. I was just a warm body being used to give a guy an orgasm, wrote one. Men treat me like 2 hands and 3 holes, grumbled another. Ultimately, wrote a third, it's about allowing the male to use your body. The idea of being used for sex like a masturbatory device, observed a guy about his female friends, is a common complaint. A complaint perhaps, but women, too, tend to prioritize male orgasm. Most of the time we don't ask for anything in bed, Celeste admitted, or at least I don't. Her priority was to impress her partners. I want to kind of blow him out of the water, she explained. If they attempt to do the same for me, that's great, though most of the time that does not happen. Other women agreed that they focused on giving orgasms instead of seeking them. I don't feel like I've had a sexual experience if the guy doesn't come, wrote one. Male orgasm was paramount, I will do everything in my power, insisted another, to get him off. Another said that she would focus completely on her partner's orgasm. Their own pleasure was beside the point. My sexuality was filled with anxiety and my need to please the guy instead of worrying about my own pleasure, wrote one student. Even if I was in charge, another revealed, I did not make sure I was being pleased. Some women feel that expecting an orgasm from a male hookup partner is demanding or rude. The women at the University of Southern California did as well. They told Butler that women cater to guys, want men to be happy, and want to make the guy feel good about himself. Said one interviewee, we want them to be happy with the hookup, with the orgasm or whatever, and with us. And our ability to create that for them. If women deprioritize their own orgasm, it might be because they suspect that it's pointless to do otherwise. Some men, like the Stanford guy above, willingly admit that they're not interested in giving women pleasure. I don't think her orgasm matters as much to the guy, said another. Say they meet a girl at a party and it's a one-night thing. Explained a third about guys in general, I don't think it's gonna matter to them. When asked about the importance of female orgasm, another male student retorted, I don't give a shit. Importantly, men aren't uniformly uninterested in female orgasm, they are specifically disinterested in the orgasms of women they're hooking up with. The guy who didn't give a shit about women's orgasms, for instance, followed up to clarify that he was all about orgasm if the woman was his girlfriend. Differentiating between sex with girlfriends and Hookups, it turns out, is common, I think if you're in a long-term relationship, said another guy, it's essential that she has an orgasm during sexual activity. Short-term relationships, he specified, were entirely different. Men generally agreed that a woman's orgasm is more important if it's in a relationship than if it's a one-night stand or if it's somebody I care about. Another man explained the expectation that he gives his girlfriends orgasms like this. Now that I'm in a relationship, I think her orgasms are actually pretty important. More important than I think the hookup because you have more invested in that person. It's more a reciprocal thing. Invoking the ideas of care and reciprocity to differentiate hookup sex from relationship sex is consistent with Mimi Shippers' idea that students think that relationships are a site for interpersonal kindness, but hookups are not. Many men think of relationships as a meeting of equals, in which they're accountable for treating the other person with respect. Another guy made it explicit, in a relationship, he said, there's much more expected as far as like equality-wise, like give and take sexually. The data on orgasm reveals this dynamic clearly. Women in relationships are having almost 7 times as many orgasms as women. Hooking up for the first time and the orgasm gap between men and women shrinks by half. Many men want to give orgasms to their girlfriends, whom they care about, want to please, and believe should be treated as equals, but feel little need to do their hookup partners the same courtesy. Men, then, aren't uniformly dismissive of women's pleasure, just that of the women they're hooking up with. That's because men in committed relationships aren't playing by the rules of hookup culture. The guys who are hooking up, though, often are. And while the rules of heterosexual relationships are at least a little influenced by what women want, the rules that men play by when they're just looking to hook up are made and enforced, first and foremost, by other men. In this game, women's pleasure isn't a bonus at all, it's a bargaining chip. Corey and his friends were at a late breakfast on Saturday when his friend Simon sheepishly admitted that he'd hooked up with Tegan the night before. Tegan was a bit frumpy, not a 10, and so he waited for the ridicule that he knew would come. And, sure enough, Corey admitted, all of my friends, including myself, immediately judged him for hooking up with a girl that we all thought was unattractive. Simon took the ribbing and backpedaled. He agreed that she wasn't good-looking, although we don't really know if he thought so, and tried to change the subject. That night they all went out again and they lost Simon in the blur of drink and noise and people. At about 1 a.m., Corey and his friends decided they'd struck out and went back to one of their rooms to post-party. Simon barged in about an hour later with a big smile on his face. Ready to redeem himself from the night before, he announced that he'd just had sex with Tyree, a girl he was confident everyone agreed was hot. His enthusiasm was a lot different than from the morning, Corey commented, as he knew that he was going to get a better reaction. And a good response he got. High fives all around. But when Simon went back to his room to crash, the guys started gossiping about whether Tyree got around and agreed she did. Given her reputation, said one of Corey's friends, it's not worth hooking up with her. This started a debate about Simon, whether he had game, could talk women into sex, and if the women he had hooked up with counted. Simon was buffeted by 2 contrasting imperatives: have sex with hot, elusive women, but, whatever you do, have sex. Sometimes guys get lucky with a girl who is both beautiful and selective about whom she hooks up with, but often they have to choose between hooking up with an available woman or no woman at all. Those who hook up with women who are considered ugly or easy may attract reprimands, because it means that they can't successfully play a higher status woman. "They'll tease you like that," said one male student. "Talk about her, say she's a dog." Another explained why he tried to avoid sexual contact with women, his guy friends. Disparaged, "I'd never hear the end of it," he said. Matthew Desmond, the Harvard professor and MacArthur genius grant recipient, calls it shit talk. Desmond studied forest firefighters. Tough men with a dangerous job who spend a lot of time in all-male, or nearly all-male, groups. "There's a large amount of shit talking that goes on out here," said one of the firefighters. "There's a large amount of teasing each other and picking on each other and poking fun at each other. And it goes back and forth all the time." Crew members threw barbs and tossed insults as a matter of routine. They were loud, quick, crude, and abrasive. Shit talk had winners and losers. To be successful, Desmond wrote, a player must be clever and mean, his comments must prick. When insulted, he has to return an insult that is at least as sharp, and he must do so swiftly and eloquently. Most important, he must never ever lose his cool. The denigration of women, Desmond observed, was primary fodder for shit talk. Insulting men's masculinity with feminizing slurs and making crude claims about what they did to each other's moms or girlfriends was par for the course. Its other primary fodder was the skills involved in being a good firefighter. God forbid one wielded a chainsaw poorly, didn't know what a cotter pin was, or had to take a break while digging line. Ignorance, incompetence, mistakes, or lapses could attract a volley of insults. "It was fun," said one of the firefighters. "It's a fun thing to do. To upset people out here is hilarious. When you know you're getting under somebody's skin, it's like, yes, I'm there. I love to do it, it's awesome." They claimed that it was just good joshing, and generally the guys did like it. Counterintuitively, perhaps, it was a way for them to show each other that they were close. As one of Desmond's firefighters argued, you can't shit talk just anybody. You can only be humorously horrible to people you really love. Like family, he said, you can make fun of each other and they're not gonna get mad at you. This phenomenon is not unique to firefighters, nor even to all male groups. When two people are getting to know each other, there is often a first tease. An opportunity to crack a joke arises, and a person may wonder, if I poke him in a place we both know is sensitive, will he trust that I am doing it in a friendly way? If she decides to try it out and gets a laugh in response, the friendship has just leveled up. Teasing brings people closer because it's a way of saying, I know you well enough to know where your buttons are and how hard I can push them without actually hurting you. And you know me well enough to know that I mean no harm. Shit talk is teasing, but on steroids. Shit talk, Desmond explains, through a strange admixture of fraternity and antagonism, conveys both affection and belonging. It is a secret handshake, a hug and a wink, and it functions as a means of passage into the ranks of the fire crew. But, since shit talk has winners and losers, it also serves to arrange the firefighters into a hierarchy. They're brothers, but some are tougher and quicker and meaner than others, and those guys are on top. So, when Corey and his friends gave Simon shit for hooking up with Tegan, it was a way of bonding and stratifying their band of brothers. Just like the firefighters, they used shit talk to mark Simon as part of the group, but also to grapple for position within it. This talk was often misogynistic, as it was among the fire crew, and, while masculinity was at stake for both groups, for men on campus, the object of their skill set wasn't fire, but the very bodies of their female peers. Some of Desmond's firefighters were more comfortable with shit talk than others, and the same is true among college men. Simon seemed Interested in playing the game, but wasn't quick or mean enough to do it. Well, if he had been a better shit talker, he would have brought up a woman that one of his guy friends had slept with that everyone agreed was uglier than Tegan or easier than Tyree. That would have turned the negative attention away from him and to someone else who could be brought down a peg. But Simon wasn't a good shit talker, at least not yet. As for Corey, it made him nervous. He called it a hostile environment, noting that if his friends were willing to make fun of Simon to his face and talk shit behind his back, there was no reason they wouldn't do that to him as well. You have no idea what is going to be said about you, he wrote. It was an uneasiness that he had talked about with his closest friend. I don't want our reputations to be hurt or judged after a hookup with the wrong girl, he protested. If men are going to play this game, they need a strategy, a way to manage the contradictory imperatives to hook up only with women that count, but always hook up. The answer is to make a preemptive strike. I learned this from Brian Sweeney, a sociologist who interviewed a group of white middle and upper-class fraternity men. These are the men who, on average, are the most enthusiastic about hooking up and most likely to endorse the sexual double standard. They are representative of the type of guy who adheres to a competitive player masculinity in which men play and women get played. There are men like this on any campus. I mean, why do you think it's called scoring? Asked a Dartmouth student rhetorically. It's like you're scoring with the women, yeah, but you're like scoring on the other guys. It's more about the social cachet it buys, said a New York university alum about hooking up. It's a way to prove our masculinity. Men are impressed when their buddies hook up, said a student at Stanford, because if a guy hooks up with a girl, he sort of broke down her wall of protection. As Simon's story suggests, though, the game isn't just about getting girls, it's about getting the right girls. A Real player can score with a good girl that other men agree counts as worth getting.